It all started on a quiet evening, just a few days after my husband left for his business trip. The house felt different without him. Too big, too empty, too quiet. I had never really noticed how much I relied on his presence, even for the little things, like the sound of him moving around or the way he always left the hallway light on at night. Now it was just me and our dog, Max. Max wasn't just a pet, he was family. A big, fluffy golden retriever with the kindest eyes and a tail that wagged like he had a motor inside him. He had always been my husband's shadow, following him from room to room, curling up beside him on the couch, and waiting eagerly by the door for him to come home. But now with my husband gone, it was like Max didn't know what to do with himself. And honestly, neither did I. The first night alone was the hardest. Every little noise made me jump. The creak of the house settling, the rustle of the trees outside, it all felt amplified. Max seemed to sense my unease. He stayed close, resting his head on my lap as I absent-mindedly ran my fingers through his fur. His warmth was comforting, a silent reassurance that I wasn't truly alone. But then something happened, something I never expected. One evening after finishing dinner, I walked into the living room and found Max staring at something. His ears were perked, his body tense. At first I thought he was just being his usual curious self. But then I followed his gaze. There was nothing there, just the darkened hallway leading to our bedroom. A chill ran down my spine. "Max?" I called softly. He didn't move. His eyes were locked on something invisible to me. My heart pounded. Was it just my imagination? Was I letting my nerves get the best of me? I shook it off and tried to distract myself. I turned on the TV, curled up on the couch, and invited Max to join me. He hesitated, glancing back at the hallway, before finally jumping up beside me. It took a while for my heartbeat to slow, but eventually the warmth of his fur and the familiar hum of the television lulled me into a sense of calm. And then, late that night, something even stranger happened. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I felt it. A sudden movement at the foot of the bed. Maximum. He had never slept on our bed before. He had his own comfy spot in the corner, but now he was there, pressing up against me protectively. His breathing was steady, but his body was alert, like he was standing guard. That's when I heard it. A sound. A faint creak outside our bedroom door. I froze. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it just the wind? The house settling again? Or was there someone there? Max lifted his head, his ears twitching. And then he growled. A deep, low growl that sent shivers down my spine. And in that moment, I knew. Something wasn't right. My breath caught in my throat as I lay frozen in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. Max's growl was quiet but firm. A warning. Something was off. I swallowed hard, my ears straining to catch another sound. The house was silent now, but that didn't make me feel any better. If anything, the quiet made it worse. Max shifted beside me, his body tense, his gaze locked on the bedroom door. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I stroked his fur, hoping to calm both him and myself. But he didn't relax. He stayed perfectly still, his muscles coiled like he was ready to leap into action. I debated what to do. Should I get up and check? Should I stay put? Call someone? But who would I even call? It was probably nothing, right? Just the house settling, or maybe the wind outside. But if that were the case, why was Max acting this way? Taking a slow, shaky breath, I forced myself to sit up. My hands gripped the edge of the blanket, knuckles white. Max's ears twitched, his eyes darting back to me like he was waiting for my next move. Then suddenly he jumped down from the bed. My heart nearly stopped. He padded toward the door, his body low, his movements cautious. He paused just before reaching it, glancing back at me as if to say, "Are you coming?" I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to stay put, to pull the covers over my head, like a child hiding from a nightmare. But this wasn't a nightmare. It was real. And Max wasn't acting this way for no reason. Gathering my courage, I slid out of bed, my feet touching the cold floor. I followed Max, my pulse racing, my breath shallow. With every step toward the door, my stomach twisted tighter. My mind ran wild with possibilities. What if someone had broken in? What if I wasn't alone in the house? Max sniffed at the gap beneath the door, his tail stiff. His growl had faded, replaced by deep, steady breaths. He was listening, waiting. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to steady my heartbeat. And then, there it was again. The sound. This time it wasn't just a creak. It was a faint shuffling, just outside the door. I gasped, clamping a hand over my mouth. Max tensed, his ears standing tall. My mind screamed at me to do something, but I was frozen in place. Someone, or something, was out there. I stood there, barely breathing, my hand gripping the doorknob. The air in the room felt thick, heavy with something I couldn't name. Max was still as a statue, his nose twitching as he tried to pick up whatever scent was just beyond the door. His body was tense, ready. I wasn't sure if that made me feel safer or more terrified. Another sound. This time it was different. A soft, almost deliberate tap, like fingers against wood. My stomach twisted. Someone was out there. I glanced at my phone on the nightstand. My mind screamed for me to grab it, to call someone, but my body wouldn't move. I was stuck in this moment, caught between fear and the unknown. What if I opened the door and found nothing? Would that be better or worse? Max let out another low growl. Then suddenly, before I could stop him, he lunged. His weight hit the door with a force that rattled the frame, his claws scratching at the wood as he barked. Deep, loud, angry. The kind of bark that sent chills down my spine. And then, silence. Whatever had been on the other side was gone. No more tapping, no more shuffling. Just the echo of Max's barks fading into the quiet house. I swallowed hard. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe I was overthinking everything. But as I stood there, my hand still gripping the knob, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there. And that, whatever it wasn't finished with me yet. Max stood rigid in front of the door, his fur bristling. His deep, steady breathing was the only sound in the room. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the frantic beat of my heart. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what just happened. Had someone really been there? Or was I letting my fear get the best of me? Slowly, I reached for the doorknob again. My fingers trembled as I wrapped them around the cold metal. I hesitated, my pulse hammering in my ears. A part of me didn't want to know what was on the other side, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that whatever had been there wasn't just some trick of my imagination. Taking a deep breath, I turned the knob and pulled the door open. Max lunged forward, his body tense as he stepped into the dark hallway. I flicked on the light, my eyes darting around, searching for any sign of movement. But there was nothing. The hallway was empty, the house still. I swallowed, trying to calm the growing sense of unease in my stomach. But then, something caught my eye. The front door, it was unlocked. I knew I had locked it before going to bed. I knew it. My throat went dry as I took a step closer. My fingers shook as I reached for the lock, pressing it back into place with a quiet click. Max stayed by my side, his eyes locked on the door as if waiting for something to happen. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. Whoever had been outside, they weren't trying to get in. They had already been inside. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I stood frozen in front of the locked door. My breath came in short, uneven gasps, my mind struggling to process the terrifying realization. If the door had been unlocked, that meant whoever, or whatever, had been inside wasn't trying to break in. They had already been here. Max let out a soft whine, his ears twitching as he turned away from the door. He sniffed the air, then suddenly bolted toward the living room. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, my legs moving instinctively to follow him. My hands clenched into fists as I stepped carefully, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The living room was dim, the glow from the street lights casting long shadows across the floor. Everything looked normal, nothing out of place, no broken windows. But Max wasn't focused on the doors or windows. He was staring at the couch. I took a slow, hesitant step forward, my skin crawling. The couch. Why was he so fixated on it? My stomach twisted as I realized something. When I had gone to bed, the throw blanket had been folded neatly on the armrest. Now it was crumpled, pushed into the corner like someone had been sitting there. I swallowed hard. My eyes darted to the hallway, then back to Max, who hadn't moved. He was waiting for me to figure it out, waiting for me to see what he already sensed. My voice was barely above a whisper. "Is someone here?" Silence. Then a noise upstairs. It wasn't loud, just a faint creak, like the weight of a foot pressing against an old floorboard. My entire body tensed. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone. The air felt heavier now, thick with something unseen. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. How long had they been inside? Had they been watching me this whole time? Sleeping in my house while I was unaware? My skin prickled with fear. Max let out a deep growl, his stance firm. He was ready for whatever was about to happen. And then footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from upstairs. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then from the darkness above, a voice, low, calm. "I was wondering when you'd notice." The voice came from the top of the stairs, its tone so calm, so eerily steady, that it sent a chill straight to my bones. My heart raced in my chest as I stood frozen in the living room, every muscle in my body tense. The steps creaked again, and the voice spoke once more. "I've been waiting for you." I couldn't think. My mind spun in circles, trying to piece together what was happening. The house felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in around me. Max growled again, his teeth bared, but he didn't move from my side. He was as terrified as I was, but I couldn't focus on that now. The footsteps were getting closer, slow, methodical. I didn't know what I was expecting to see, but I couldn't just stand there. I had to do something. My mind screamed at me to run, to get out of the house, but my feet were glued to the floor. "Who are you?" My voice trembled, but I forced the words out. "What do you want?" The figure at the top of the stairs didn't answer immediately. Instead, there was silence, a pause that stretched on far too long. My eyes locked on the shadows at the top of the stairs, straining to make out any movement. The only sound now was Max's deep growls and my labored breathing. Then the figure stepped forward into the dim light, and I gasped. It was a woman, tall with long dark hair that hung loosely around her shoulders. She wore a simple, faded dress, but it was the look in her eyes that sent a wave of terror crashing over me. There was something unnatural about her gaze, cold, calculating. It wasn't fear in her eyes. It was something much worse. "I've been watching you for a long time," she said softly, almost too softly, like she was savoring the moment. "Why?" I choked out, backing up a step, my heart hammering in my throat. The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she smiled, a twisted, unsettling grin that made my stomach turn. And then, just as quickly as the tension had built, it unraveled. She vanished. I blinked, sure that my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, she was gone, vanished into thin air, as though she had never been there at all. My breath caught in my throat as I turned to Max. His growl stopped abruptly, and for a brief, terrifying second, I wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. But then the door slammed shut behind me. I whipped around, but there was no one, just the silence. And that's when I realized she hadn't been the threat. The true danger was something I had never seen coming. I stood frozen in place, my mind trying to process what had just happened. The woman, the footsteps, the voice, everything had felt so real. Yet now she was gone, like a figment of my imagination. I looked around the living room, my eyes darting from corner to corner, searching for some sign that I wasn't just losing my mind. Max, however, seemed calm now, his body relaxed as if nothing had happened at all. I glanced back at the front door. The lock was still engaged, the house still eerily quiet. My breath came out in a shaky exhale, the tension in my shoulders finally starting to ease. Maybe it had been some sort of hallucination, a byproduct of the stress, the loneliness, the fear that had been building up over the past few days. Maybe the isolation of being home alone with Max had started to play tricks on me. But as I turned to head back to the bedroom, I saw it, a small, carefully folded note on the kitchen counter. It hadn't been there before. My blood ran cold. I walked over to it, my fingers trembling as I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was neat, precise, and chilling. You should have left when you had the chance. You're not alone. A cold sweat broke out across my skin. The note was real, and whoever had left it knew something I didn't. Suddenly, I heard a noise from upstairs again. A small creak, followed by a faint whisper of movement. It wasn't Max. He was lying by the door, completely still. I glanced up, heart pounding, but I couldn't bring myself to move closer to the stairs. The front door, the locked one, began to shake slightly as if someone was trying to get in. That wasn't possible. I had checked it. I ran over to it, my fingers fumbling at the lock again. But the door was jammed, as though something heavy was blocking it from the outside. Then through the glass, I saw her again, the woman from the stairs. But this time, she wasn't smiling. She was staring directly at me. I backed away slowly, my mind racing, not knowing what was real or what wasn't anymore. It didn't matter. She had made one thing clear. I was never truly alone. The house, the silence, Max. It had all been part of something much bigger than I could have ever imagined. And no matter what I did, it was never going to let me leave.